Ms. Odom, thank you very much for your leadership and for your testimony today.
Thank you, Chairman.
I'd like to ask, first of all, Mr. Ambassador, if you could, I know that you interact and not only travel but receive delegations probably almost every day. I know I meet with delegations often, legislative as well as executive branch people, and I always give them the tip report, whatever our best practices up to that date is, whether it be for the military, for any aspect, including trying to get this situation awareness campaign regarding airlines and other means of transportation across to them. And I'm wondering, since you especially meet with the Tier 2 watch list folks, the Tier 3 countries, what has been the reaction from those tip leaders who very often are very deeply committed themselves, often up against a very reluctant executive branch or prime minister or lethargic parliament or Congress, to really take on what the Blue Lightning campaign is doing and what you know can actually save lives. Are they responsive to it?
I think one of the things that we've seen typically with the governments that we talk to, as far as specifically the transportation industry, but I also try to raise the issues around the hospitality industry as well, knowing that there's often not the same posture of the government vis-a-vis that. You also often have government ownership of rail or even airlines. I think that it's an issue that governments are starting to come to. I think we moved beyond the blank stare response with a few of the governments. I think that one of the hardest things, of course, is that often the countries that are on Tier 3 and Tier 2 watch list, as you've mentioned, are countries that don't necessarily have the strongest intergovernmental structures. And so what we've seen, for instance, in the United Kingdom, where we've got some of the airlines that are looking at some of these issues as well with Virgin Atlantic specifically, and others, is that those are very functioning governments as far as ministries that truly do regulate their transportation, ministries that are able to talk to each other and to bring in the anti-trafficking ethos of the Home Ministry, of the Justice Ministry, of the Foreign Ministry into these other parts of the government. And frankly, we do see many of the Tier 3 and Tier 2 watch list countries as not having as robust of a conversation across their ministries. So one of the things that we've been doing to try to start that up is to very much use the model of the Senior Policy Operating Group, the President's Interagency Task Force, et cetera, and not only across the agencies, but the things that we've seen, for instance, at DHS and others who have done an internal survey across all of their components to drive these issues out. And I think that that's where we're seeing the difference. I can't say that we've seen national airlines or national railways or others ramp up their efforts the way that we've seen here in the United States, but I think it's something that we're going to continue to push out to our foreign counterparts.
Can I just ask you, are you satisfied with the state-federal cooperation? For example, on Friday, the U.S. Attorney General for the state for our region in New Jersey joined the State Attorney General and other interested parties at a Friday rollout of many of the things they're trying to do to stop trafficking relative to the Super Bowl. Do you find that there is a good cooperation with states, not just foreign states, but also United States, especially as it relates to this Super Bowl?
I think that we've certainly seen that, and I think that New Jersey is a good example of that. Frankly, we've seen that around a number of the last Super Bowls. I think that some of that actually flows from the prioritization of this in a bipartisan fashion by the National Association of Attorneys General. I think this was something that we certainly have seen in the last 3 or 4 years, and the leadership among the Attorneys General often then has been able to piggyback on that. So if you see the leadership that Attorney General Abbott, for instance, had in Texas, that was very much in keeping with the work he was doing on the Pillars of Hope campaign of the National Association of Attorneys General. So I think it's starting to come together. What's interesting is that it's coming together more through political will and commitment on the part of both state and federal actors than it is in the way that other projects sometimes come together. As you know, there's a very successful set of almost pilot project local task forces, the ACT teams that the Department of Justice puts out. But that is not in every judicial district, that's not in every congressional district, and it's not in every state. And so I think that what we've seen is that kind of energy very much comes from the actors involved rather than necessarily the funding streams.
Let me ask you, Ms. Odom, and I'll just ask a few questions, then yield to my colleagues and submit a number of questions for the record. But at previous, and you too, Mr. Ambassador, you might want to answer this. At previous Super Bowls, we've seen social media advertisements for prostitution increase in the lead up to the games. We know that Twitter, as I mentioned before, and again, talking to some individuals before this hearing, we talked about Twitter at great length. Backpage, which was mentioned very strongly by our former ambassador to Liechtenstein. Are you satisfied we're making a difference in the social media, which we've seen it with Craigslist. Time and again, members of Congress, including myself, have written to the Craigslist founder, and they are unmoved. There needs to be prosecution, and vigorous prosecution, it would seem to me, for being part of an absolutely horrific and scandalous and illegal operation. Your thoughts on that? Secondly, Ms. Odom, if you could speak to how can we accelerate the buy-in from the other airlines? You know, Delta is here. We will be hearing from them shortly, and I think it's very significant that the wife of the president of Delta is here with us as well, Anna Bashian, I hope I'm pronouncing that correctly, underscoring the commitment of that airline. Our hope was that all the airlines would be here, and I'm not going to bash them, but please join the effort. The time has come. What are you finding? How do we accelerate that effort to get them on board?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I believe with regards to monitoring social media and incorporating the evaluation of social media activity as part of the investigative efforts is part of what ICE HSI continues to do. I believe that they're looking at it in a holistic way, and with regards to the Super Bowl preparation, for example, their outreach and training efforts as part of the Newark Task Force have proven to be very helpful, and their goal is to conduct their activities, all of their law enforcement activities, with a heightened level of awareness and screening for human trafficking. So I am satisfied that their engagement at the state and local level has been robust. The ICE HSI special agents in charge have shown a commitment, energy, and enthusiasm for working with their state and local counterparts, and I believe that is a key part of our work, is to train, to educate, to be a resource to the state and local counterparts, and I'm satisfied that that is happening. With regards to the expansion of the Blue Lightning Initiative to include other airlines, our partners at CBP continue very active efforts to educate, to visit with, to share information about Blue Lightning and the training materials that we continue to generate with the support of the Federal Law Enforcement Training Center with other airlines. I am satisfied that their efforts are very meaningful, and I hope that when I come back next time I can report on some progress and we can have more airlines. I believe hearings such as this one are important because it does tell the other airlines what their counterparts are doing, how they're engaging and training their workforce, and why it makes a difference. So I think this hearing is very important, and I thank you
I would respectfully suggest nothing sharpens the mind of a corporation or an individual than a deadline. A deadline to try to have everybody on board might be helpful as a means to that end. Say, everybody on board by the end of 2014.
Okay. Thank you.
Just a thought.
One thing that I'd like to respond to, Mr. Smith, on the issue of the airline efforts, I think that with consolidation, hopefully the American U.S. Air relationship will be able to extend in the good work of airline ambassadors, which has done so much of its good work coming out of the relationships from the American Airlines staff who founded that organization. But I think you're right, it's that notion of something more formal. We actually, I think, would like to go even one further, which is after we see that kind of training, as you've suggested, perhaps a universal or company-wide training by the carriers, then starting to look at the other aspects. the executive order that President Obama issued on government procurement, for instance, is in its final stages with the notice and comment period having closed at the end of December, which basically is putting out the notion that if somebody wants to do business with the federal government, they need to have standards about tracking their supply chains. They need to have zero tolerance policies against their people engaging in sex trafficking and facilitating those things. And I think that that's one of the things that we're going to want to talk to the carriers and others about as well, which is making sure that that folks have the skills to recognize and interdict and make the recommendations and referrals to law enforcement if they see something happening in the equipment, but also where's that shrimp being bought? Where's the cloth on the seats being sourced from, et cetera? Looking at the entire business model of the transportation industry and what kind of footprint it has on the overarching issues of modern slavery around the world.
Mr. Weber?